When I first arrived in Hamburg, I think it was around 1991, I had the feeling of belonging to that Hanseatic city. It was as if I had ever been there before. For me, it was also the first time I went out of my country, the country I was born, Spain. This, of course, if I don't count my visits to the south of Portugal with my parents as a child. I don't know why, but I think Spanish people, at least me, we consider that going to Portugal is not going abroad. Obviously, back then, I didn't know that the familiarity raised in me by the city of the Alster lakes would have a kind of link, if any, with my musical listenings later in my life. Strangely enough, over the years, those musical listenings have taken me back to the origins of my first adventure abroad. It is as if all those endless walks I took around the city, strolling round beautiful cemeteries, going through backstreets most German locals wouldn't dare to pass through, gazing at the waters of the immense Elbe, walking in the churches to listen to organ music, would have been the prelude to all those musical walks I have taken over the years by listening to the music of different composers. Those recordings, for some reason, have been linked to the city where, paradoxically, there are no Hamburgers. What we call Hamburger, it is called Frikadelle by the Hamburgers. It was the German immigrants arriving in the United States at the end of the 19th century who introduced a dish that the Americans called Hamburg steak. Then it became a Hamburger, or its short form, burger. So, if you really want to try the authentic Hamburger in Hamburg, you need to ask for a Frikadelle in one of the many street food stalls or restaurants. It was precisely in Hamburg where Barthold Heinrich Brockes was born 5 years before Johann Sebastian Bach was born in Eisenach. Brockes died in Hamburg 3 years before Bach would die in Leipzig. Brockes was a writer, a poet, and a politician of the beginnings of the German Enlightenment. As a young man, he traveled extensively to Italy, France, and the Netherlands. He was a member of the Hamburg Senate and an imperial Count Palatine. Brockes fought for women's emancipation through education. In 1712, he wrote a poem entitled Der für die Sünden der Welt gemarterte und sterbende Jesus, the story of Jesus suffering and dying for the sins of the world, known as the Brockes Passion. It is an oratorio in verse, very popular in its time, which was set to music by many composers. Among those composers, I want to highlight 3 of them: Reinhard Kaiser, Georg Philipp Telemann, and Georg Friedrich Händel. Reinhard Kaiser developed most of his career in Hamburg. A very prolific opera composer, Johann Mattheson described him as the greatest composer of opera in the world. Kaiser may be the first one to set the Brockes Passion to music in 1712. His composition became a reference for many other composers who came along after him. His Passion was well performed by many, including Johann Sebastian Bach, who lived hundreds of kilometers away in Leipzig. By the way, Bach never set the Brockes poem to music because he was not allowed by the Leipzig Council. They wanted him to stick to the biblical literalism. If I had to recommend a recording of this work by Kaiser, no wonder that would be the Brockes Passion performed by the vocal ensemble Vox Luminis and the Belgian ensemble Les Muffati, conducted by Peter van Heyghen on the music label Alte. This performance is, simply put, exceptional. 4 years later, in 1716, the most prolific composer of all composers in history, Mr. Georg Philipp Telemann, was the one to set the Brockes poem to music. Back then, Telemann was working as a music director of the city of Frankfurt, around 500 kilometers away from Hamburg. 5 more years had to go by until Telemann definitively settled down in Hamburg in 1721. He remained there until he died in 1767. He only left the city for 8 months between 1737 and 1738, when he went on a trip to Paris. Telemann was a friend of Reinhard Kaiser. As for Telemann's Brockes Passion, the recording of reference for me is undoubtedly René Jacobs' On Harmonia Mundi with Rias Kammerchor Berlin and the Akademie für Alte Musik Berlin. At the same time as Telemann, but much further away from Hamburg, Georg Friedrich Handel was composing his version of the Brockes Passion in London. Handel was the most international of the three composers. Born in Germany and naturalized in England, Handel traveled to Hamburg in 1703, where he was admitted to the Oper am Gansemarkt, the present Hamburg State Opera, as a violinist and a harpsichordist. It was there when he met Reinhard Kaiser, among other musicians. Then, Handel traveled to Italy and even eternalized his name, Giorgio Federico Handel. There, he took in the style of the Italian opera. In 1710, Handel returned to Germany as a director of music for the Prince Elector of Hanover, who would later become George I of England in 1714. Handel settled down in England from 1712. The funny thing is that if you would ask a Briton to name a British classical music composer, they wouldn't doubt to answer Handel. Likewise, a German would say Handel is a German composer. Coming back to the year 1716, the thing is that Handel composed his Brockes Passion in London. Then he sent the score to Hamburg, to the house of Barthold Heinrich Brockes, where most probably it was performed for the first time. Handel's composition may be better known than Kaiser's and Telemann's. For Handel's Brockes Passion, the recording I recommend is the one on Carus, performed by Kölner Kammerchor and the Collegium Carthusianum, conducted by Peter Neumann. The chronological order of these pieces corresponds in this case to my order of preference as well: Kaiser, Telemann, and Handel. The three musicians, for different reasons, are linked to the city where there are no Hamburgers. And although Johann Sebastian Bach didn't work in Hamburg, and neither set he the poem of Barthold Heinrich Brockes to music, this city will indirectly remain linked to Bach by winds of fate. Telemann was the godfather of Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach, the son of Johann Sebastian Bach, and when Telemann died in 1767, his godson replaced him as a music director of the 5 most important churches of the city of the Elbe. Who knows, maybe Johann Sebastian Bach also thought, half a Hamburger is better than none.